parents to say, look, when they send this bullshit home, you can't say, hey, well, it's okay. Well, we can mark this the way they want us to mark this to pass the test. Well, the test needs to change. Do y'all understand?
You feel me? Things that you can reach out, touch, and feel. Y'all, it ain't nothing but the colonizer. Every time you hear science, all I hear is the colonizer. They running out here pushing that what the white man use.
We did not come here on ships from West Africa. We are the Aboriginal Americans. We are the original people of this land. These people are imposters who work with the United States government. The lie about us coming from Africa was just a way to disconnect us from our culture, our people, and our land. And the United States government used these people as a go-between. What you are looking at when you look at me is a 100% Aboriginal American. I'm from the Choctaw tribe and also the Geechee tribe. The jig is up, America. We know who we are, and we want our land back. Peace to the gods.
Eugenics, the selection of desired heritable characteristics in order to improve future generations, typically in reference to humans. That's from the Britannica. Okay, most people would agree with this. Okay, so the term eugenics was coined in 1883 by British explorer and natural scientist Francis Galton, who, influenced by Charles Darwin's theory of natural selection, advocated a system that would allow the more suitable races or strains of blood a better chance of prevailing speedily over the less suitable. And really, his wording of it, which is what it is, you can't change it, based off of the mindset at that time, is what offends people, because he's saying, he's basing it off of races, you know what I mean? And the big question, or I guess the big pushback, is what Europeans at that time considered suitable. Like what fuck do they mean by suitable races? You know what I'm saying? And we all know what they meant. And science has in large part proven that to be false, right? Race in general has nothing to do with it, right? But the essence of what the man is saying is natural or selective breeding, right? You breed based off of what's considered at the time more suitable, right? So, and really throughout human history, as I'm gonna show you right here, that's been a theme. It's been a reoccurring theme. This guy, he coined the term eugenics, but the practice of eugenics existed for thousands and thousands of years prior to this man using it and wording it in the way that he has. But let's move forward. So the Italian philosopher and poet Tommaso Campanella in City of the Sun, 1623, described a utopian community in which only the socially elite are allowed to procreate, right? You can go into detail why, he's saying the socially elite, but it's basically the belief that elite people produce elite offspring. So that's why in this utopian community in which this man is describing in the City of the Sun, a poem or a short story, is the socially elite will produce socially elite offspring, right? And this is in 1623, right? This is from Plato's Republic, 378 BCE. Okay, it states that efforts to select matings in order to secure offspring with desirable traits date from ancient times. Plato's Republic, 378 BCE depicts a society where efforts are undertaken to improve human beings through selective breeding, right? In Plato's Republic, it says, when it came to people whose bodies, and he's talking about, as far as a doctor, and what you hear? But when it came to people whose bodies were permeated with disease, he did not attempt to extend their useful lives and have them producing children who would probably be just like them. I'll read that again. But when it came to people whose bodies were permeated with disease, he did not attempt to extend their useless lives and have them producing children who would probably be just like them. Asclepius did not think that he should treat people. Asclepius is a doctor who lived at the time of Plato. Asclepius did not think that he should treat people whose habits rendered them incapable of living, since treating them did no good, either for the patients themselves or for the state. And again, I'm showing you these facts of history just to point out that people have understood or had an idea that selective breeding produced a certain type of offspring thousands of years ago. Okay, so this is from Plato, the Republic of Plato in 378 BCE. Okay. Xenophon of Athens, born in 430 BC, died probably 354, 355 BC. It is easy to see, declared Xenophon, that these measures with regard to childbearing, opposed as they were to the customs of the rest of Greece, produced a race excelling in size and strength. Not easily would one find people healthier and more physically useful than the Spartans. And there's a lot of information about I should say stories, right, about the Spartans and some of their practices. And this is from Plutarch, right? He claimed that the ill-born Spartan babies were tossed into a chasm at the foot of Mount Taygetus. I did some research on that because that sounded a little crazy, and they really can't confirm it, but other practices by the Spartans is what led them to say such things. One of Sparta's most brutal practices involved a so-called contest of endurance in which adolescents were flogged, sometimes to death, in front of an altar at the sanctuary of Artemis or Thea. Okay, and the Spartans saw marriage primarily as a means for conceiving new soldiers, and citizens were encouraged to consider the health and fitness of their mate before tying the knot, right? So this is all the way back. Sparta dates from 900 to 192 BC. Okay, so people as far back as then practicing selective breeding. So even though the term eugenics was coined in the 1800s, people have been practicing eugenics for thousands of years. Okay, now this is for my commissions out there. Though not technically the same kind of eugenics, the Egyptians was a little different with theirs, but everybody knows about King Tut, right? It is believed that King Tut, or a lot of it's believed that he was physically a sickly individual, and some science and some speculation based off of Egyptian practices of inbreeding, right? Ancients believe, at that last paragraph, it's believed that the pharaohs did this, inbreed, was because of the ancient belief that the god Osiris married his sister Isis to keep their bloodline pure, right? So this is the Egyptians thousands of years ago practicing selective breeding in the belief that they could keep their bloodline pure, right? Which is technically true, but it didn't work out quite the way that they hoped it would. Um, King Tut, I believe it is believed that he had bone abnormalities and that he died of malaria, but it is also widely the conclusion is that he was a sickly person because they found canes and a lot of medicine in his tomb when they searched it. Plus, he had some bone abnormalities when they examined his body. Okay. Now, this is from and I didn't put a lot of this in here, but this is just an example again of people understanding that eugenics, as far as the human race is concerned, is something that we have practiced for thousands of years. This is an awesome essay by Alan G. Roper from 1913 entitled Ancient Eugenics, and in it he goes into detail about a lot of the practices of ancient people and how they handled certain offspring and also how they chose to mate. So but yeah, Ancient Eugenics, check it out. Interesting information in there, but it just supports the fact that eugenics has been around for an incredibly long time. So we're going to go back to the term eugenics, as I will do several times throughout these presentations, just to clarify what we're talking about. And eugenics is the selection of desired heritable characteristics in order to improve future generations, typically in reference to humans. We've seen how throughout history humankind has practiced forms of eugenics, of selective breeding, of selection for desirable heritable characteristics for thousands of years. It has been a common practice of humanity for thousands of years. Francis Galton added the race perspective. Other than that, he was not saying anything that human beings hadn't been actively practicing for thousands of years. Okay? Now that we have the history out the way and the simple definition, I want to go forward and talk about what's going on today and how eugenics is still being practiced. I want to focus on hereditary traits, okay? Because again, if what I'm proposing is that eugenics is an answer to a problem that we have, clearly we're talking about breeding, right? Intelligence is the factor that we are breeding for. And again, eugenics is the selection of desired heritable characteristics. The problem with African Americans is that we reproduce for the wrong reasons. We reproduce for good hair, quote unquote good hair. We reproduce for eye color. Just a lot of things that don't add up to what's considered a better human being. And again, really that's what we're talking about, because who decides what desired desirable traits are, and I really, the simplest way to put it is being healthy is better than being unhealthy. Being smart is better than being stupid. People pass down healthy traits and people pass down unhealthy traits. People pass down intelligence and people pass down stupidity. Eugenics is simply focusing on passing down intelligence and not stupidity. So we're going to talk about intelligence. Genetics and intelligence differences. 5 special findings. We're just going to read the abstract. There's a lot in here, but to make certain points, okay? Intelligence is a core construct of differential psychology and behavioral genetics. It should be so in cognitive neuroscience. It is one of the best predictors of, listen to this, people, intelligence we're talking about, is one of the best predictors of important life outcomes such as education, occupation, mental health, and physical health, illness, and mortality. Okay? Intelligence is one of the most heritable. Intelligence is one of the most heritable behavioral traits. Here, we highlight 5 genetic findings that are special to intelligence differences and that have important implications for its genetic architecture and for gene hunting expeditions. The heritability of intelligence increases from about 20% in infancy to perhaps 80% in later adulthood. Intelligence captures genetic effects on diverse cognitive and learning abilities, which correlate phenotypically about 0.3 on average, but correlate genetically about 0.6 or higher. Assortative mating, right, which is a really interesting thing. We'll talk about assortative mating is greater for intelligence, spouse correlations 0.4, than for other behavioral traits such as personality and psychopathology, or physical traits such as height and weight. Assortative mating pumps additive genetic variance into the population every generation, contributing to the high narrow heritability of intelligence. Unlike psychiatric disorders, intelligence is normally distributed with a positive end of exceptional performance that is a model for positive genetics. Intelligence is associated with education and social class and broadens the casual perspectives on how these 3 intercorrelated variables contribute to social mobility and health, illness, mortality differences. These are findings that they're discussing in this article. These 5 findings arose primarily from twin studies. They are being confirmed by the first new quantitative genetic technique in a century, genome-wide complex trait analysis, which estimates genetic influence using genome-wide genotypes in large samples of unrelated individuals. Comparing GCTA results to the results of twin studies reveal important insights into genetic architecture of intelligence that are relevant to attempts to narrow the missing heritability gap. Key things that I pointed out here, right, that I just wanted to talk about. One, it is a fact. They know that intelligence is highly heritable, right? It matters who your parents are. It matters. Assortative mating is the finding that basically, in the simplest terms, is people genuinely reproduce with people that share their certain characteristics. in the case of intelligence, smart people usually reproduce with smart people, which means that stupid people usually reproduce with stupid people, right? This is not my opinion. This is science at this point, okay? Go back to the term eugenics, and you rewind to what we discussed with the history the history of eugenics throughout multiple cultures for over thousands of years, right? Science is telling us that is just it's something that happens. It's what humans do. Okay. Again, this is genetics and intelligence differences. 5 special findings. This is from 2014, right? Or maybe updated 2015, right? Another article from the National Library of Medicine. Okay. This is thinking positively, the genetics of high intelligence, right? We're just gonna go into the abstract just to see what some of the science is saying. And this was from also 2015. Walk with me. High intelligence, general cognitive ability, is fundamental to human capital that drives societies in the information age. Understanding the origins of this intelligent capital is important for government policies, for neuroscience, and for genetics. For genetics, a key question is whether the genetic causes of high intelligence are qualitatively or quantitatively different from the normal distribution of intelligence. We report results from a sibling and twin study of high intelligence and its links with the normal distribution. We identified 360,000 sibling pairs and 9,000 twin pairs from 3 million 18-year-old males with cognitive assessments administered as part of a conscription to military service in Sweden between 1968 and 2010. This is an incredibly long time that this study took place, and that they've been studying intelligence and inheritability. We found that high intelligence is familial. Okay. It says, we found that high intelligence is familial. Make sure you can see that real well. Yeah. It's familial, heritable, and caused by the same genetic and environmental factors responsible for the normal distribution of intelligence. Okay. And again, that's kind of the point of this article, right? We know that intelligence it's familial, heritable, and caused by the same genetic and environmental factors responsible for the normal distribution of intelligence, which is it's a whole graph down here that kind of goes into that. We're not gonna worry about that. We just gonna focus on the fact that, without a doubt, if you are reproducing with somebody who is stupid, chances is your kids are gonna be stupid. If you are reproducing with somebody who's intelligent, chances are your kid's gonna be intelligent. Okay. Highlights. Again, we just went over this. High intelligence is familial and heritable as the rest of the distribution. There are no substantial genetic effects unique to high intelligence. There are no substantial environmental effects unique to high intelligence. Right? So that kind of goes directly to the nature versus nurture debate that's been happening for centuries. I'm gonna read that again. There are no substantial environmental effects unique to high intelligence, meaning environment where you live, nothing substantial. So you can have a group of people living in a very, very wealthy area, and they still have a bunch of stupid people there, right? Just like you can have incredibly intelligent people living in the ghetto. It's not necessarily the environment. A lot of it, which is coming out, which is what I'm getting to now, is who you choose to have children with. Thinking positively, the genetics of high intelligence. Go check that out. Next article from the University of Edinburgh. Some of these are older articles. I'm doing that because to show how over time we went over the history. So over time, how these genetic studies are evolving and what they're uncovering. We're gonna walk it all the way up to today. And again, why I think it's such a factor for African Americans and why we need to start focusing on this. Okay. So, College of Medicine and Veterinary Medicine, Institute of Genetics and Cancer. How much of intelligence and personality is inherited? Research undertaken using Generation Scotland Biobank data was featured in an online New Science Daily News article on the 20th, June 2017. Okay. Start right here. Yep. Genetic analysis of families in Scotland indicates that more intelligent people have fewer DNA mutations that impair intelligence and general health, rather than having more genetic variants that increase intelligence. Intelligence depends partly on environmental factors, but genes have an influence. Genes have an influence. Research on twins suggests that 50 to 80% of the variations in general intelligence between people could be down to genes. The gene variants responsible for intelligence haven't yet been identified. Remember that. They haven't yet been identified. This is in 2017. Studies of the DNA of hundreds of thousands of unrelated people suggest that only around 30% of the variation in intelligence is inherited. This differences between these percentages between the result of twin studies and genome studies has become known as the mystery of missing heritability. This is one of the most exciting studies on genetics of intelligence I've seen for a while, says Stephen Stuart Williams of the University of Nottingham, Malaysia campus, who is not involved in the work. One implication is that using gene editing to fix hundreds of mutations that slightly damage people's health would make them smarter as well as healthier, right? Again, we talking about eugenics, right? And here we have Science 2017 attempting to make a better, smarter, healthier human race, right? They not doing it, by castrating people and a lot of the other crazy stuff that was going on. But it's still eugenics nonetheless. They are actively practicing it right now, whether we accept it or not. Again, one implication is that using gene editing to fix the hundreds of mutations that slightly damage people's health would make them smarter as well as healthier. I think this strengthens the moral case for pursuing genome editing technology, says ethicist Christopher Jingle of the University of Oxford. It would be like killing two birds with one stone. Okay, there's one more part down here. The research team analyzed data from 20,000 people within the Generation Scotland Biobank study, which is looking at the health and genomes of families. The research team used a statistical method to work out how much effect rare genetic variants shared by most of the members of a family have on intelligence, as these variants are so rare in unrelated people. Other studies have missed their effect. They found that these rare genetic variants explain the differences in the percentage variation calculated by the twin studies and genome studies. If the results stand up, they've solved the missing heritability problem for intelligence, says Stuart Williams. Pretty impressive. What that basically adds up to is when we talked about the numbers up here, right? And they say research suggests that 50 to 80% of the variation in general intelligence between people could be down to genes. So basically, intelligence, 50 to 80% is down to the genes that you get from your parents. This study said that it was closer to 30%, right? Which ended up being the mystery of the missing heritability. But this study here pretty much solves that, and it was using the variants, the rare gene variants, and it says it pretty much, if the results stand up, they've solved the missing heritability problem for intelligence, which just reinforces this 50 to 80%, meaning that 50 to 80% of how smart you are is based off of your genes. Okay? How much of intelligence and personality is inherited? Intelligence, 50 to 80% is what it's looking like based on the numbers. Okay? Okay, so the next article, 22 genes linked to increased intelligence, right? So in the previous article, they said that they hadn't identified certain genes yet. Well, that's later on that same year, more tests going on. They have identified, and this is in 2017, so we'll get up to the day shortly. But again, 22 genes linked to increased intelligence. This is the from the Genetic Literacy Project. Okay. Genome-wide association studies, GWAS for short, search for differences in people's genetic makeup, their genotypes that correlate with differences in their observable traits, their phenotypes. It was a GWAS recently published in Nature Genetics. A team of scientists from around the world analyzed DNA sequences of 78,308 people for correlations with general intelligence as measured by IQ tests. Uh, Says the major goal of the study was to identify single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs, that correlate significantly with intelligent test scores. Of the over 12 million SNPs analyzed, 336 correlated significantly with intelligence, implicating 22 different genes. One of the genes is involved in regulating the growth of neurons. Another is associated with intellectual disability and cerebral malformation. Together, the SNPs accounted for about 5% the differences across people in intelligence. Of course, intelligence is not solely the product of DNA. Notice in every article they allude to that, right? So they're telling you it's not the only factor in with DNA and genetics, not the only factor of intelligence, but it is a major factor. We have to start acknowledging that. Of course, intelligence is not solely the product of DNA, and no scientist studying intelligence thinks otherwise. The environment has a major impact on the development of intelligence or any other psychological trait. All the same, knowledge gained from molecular genetic research may one day be used to identify children at risk for developing serious intellectual deficits, and for whom certain types of interventions early in life may reduce that risk. Okay. So, as of 2017, in that year, they've identified genes linked to increased intelligence. What that means, and the point of this was to show that everybody don't have these genes. Only certain people carry these genes. Um, It matters who you reproduce with. You can produce smarter and healthier human beings. And that's what eugenics is. And that's how we solve the African American problem. Next article. The New Genetics of Intelligence is from nature.com. 232 citations. Key points. Until 2017, 2018, January 2018. Key points. Till 2017, genome-wide polygenic scores derived from genome-wide association studies of intelligence were able to predict only 1% of the variance in intelligence in independent samples. Point 2, polygenic scores derived from GWAS of intelligence can now predict 4% of variance in intelligence. If you just, that last article was 2017. This is like in 6 months, right? Went from 1% to 4%. More than 10% of the variance in intelligence can be predicted by multi-polygenic scores derived from GWAS of both intelligence and years of education. This accounts for more than 20% of the 50% heritability of intelligence. That's kind of deep right there. There's more than 10% of the variance in intelligence can be predicted by multi-polygenic scores. Right, the multi-polygenic scores is what they do to identify certain traits, right, derived from the GWAS of both intelligence and years of education. This accounts for more than 20% of the 50% heritability of intelligence. Polygenic scores are unique predictors in 2 ways. First, they predict psychological and behavioral outcomes just as well from birth as later in life. Second, polygenic scores are casual predictors in the sense that nothing in our brain's behavior or environment can change the differences in DNA sequence that we inherited from our parents. Polygenic scores for intelligence can bring the powerful construct of intelligence to any research in the life science without having to assess intelligence through the use of tests. So that's basically saying they can look at your polygenic score and tell how smart you is without a test. Without you, they don't have to test you. They can look at your genes and tell how smart you are. Intelligence, the ability to learn, reason, and solve problems, is at the forefront of behavioral genetic research. Intelligence is highly heritable. You keep saying it, I can say it 1,000 times, black people. It's highly heritable. It predicts important educational, occupational, and health outcomes better than any other trait. Research genome-wide association studies, GWAS, have successfully identified inherited genome sequence differences that account for 20% of 50% heritability of intelligence. These findings open new avenues for research into causes and consequences of intelligence using genome-wide polygenic scores that aggregate the effects of thousands of genetic variants. Check it out. New Genetics of Intelligence. Eugenics, the selection of desired heritable characteristics in order to improve future generations. typically in reference to humans. Uh, Hopefully, what I've shown today is that one, we most definitely, based off of the condition of a lot of these brothers and sisters out here who are displaying levels of retardation that are so sad and heartbreaking that you just hope that these brothers get help. And these brothers and sisters is out here reproducing, man. And they teaching their children to be anti-intellectual, right? So we got stupid people already having kids that's inheriting those traits, right? The parents is telling them to be dumber. We in a bad spot, black people. Um, this is again, this part one. I just wanted to point out how science right now is actively attempting to produce healthier and smarter human beings. Um, where is he at? Um, what Francis Galton was saying was that the more suitable races or strains of blood have a better chance to prevail speedily over the less suitable, right? Basically saying that the more socially elite should reproduce and the less suitable races shouldn't. Throughout history, we've seen this reoccurring thing. And today, we actively have scientists attempting to produce a better human race. Um, yeah, eugenics, the answer to the African American problem. Part one. Again, I think I got a two and a three. Y'all stay tuned for that. We're gonna go more into the actual problem and the causes for that problem and why I think that this issue deserves more attention. Um, and if you made it this far, love, man, love. It's your boy Pro Black Politics. Appreciate you tuning in. It's Conscious Community Network. Peace, man.
Parents to say, look, when they send this bullshit home, you can't say, hey, well, it's okay. Well, we can mark this the way they want us to mark this to pass the test. Well, the test needs to change. Do y'all understand?
You feel me? Things that you can reach out, touch, and feel. Y'all, it ain't nothing but the colonizer. Every time you hear science, all I hear is the colonizer. They running out here pushing it what the white man use.
We did not come here on ships from West Africa. We are the Aboriginal Americans. We are the original people of this land. These people are imposters who work with the United States government. The lie about us coming from Africa was just a way to disconnect us from our culture, our people, and our land. And the United States government used these people as a go between. What you are looking at when you look at me is a 100% Aboriginal American. I'm from the Choctaw tribe and also the Geechee tribe. The jig is up, America. We know who we are, and we want our land back. Peace to the gods.